First of all, thank you very much for doing the interview. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
If we could start, can you just tell me what's happening inside Syria?
Well, it's August, in year 3 of the conflict, and the challenges are greater than we've seen before. And the military situation has gotten much more complicated with the arrival of troops from Hezbollah, from Iran, from Iraq. The fact that certain extremist groups have joined the fight. We've got local councils popping up all over the country, elected by communities to help govern areas that have been liberated from the regime, but they've never governed before. And some of them are desperate for training to learn how to do their job. The humanitarian situation, because of the fighting, the increased fighting in certain parts of the country, has never been so difficult. Access is a huge issue for the humanitarian community, obviously, and it's hard to get into a community. Look at Homs, where in the center of the city you've got several thousand families still stuck. It's very hard to get humanitarian assistance into them. So it's a very difficult time. I'm pretty proud to say that the United States, because we have such a comprehensive approach to the situation in Syria, we're able to respond to a certain extent on all of those fronts. But it's a tough month.
Let's break it up into two parts. One side looking at what the U.S. is doing inside of Syria, or at least through its partners, and the second being what the U.S. is doing to help the refugees on the Turkish side of the border. And we can also talk about Jordan and Lebanon if you like. So can you just give me an overview? What is the U.S. doing in Syria through its partners?
If you look at where our funding goes, and that's the best way to describe the different categories, by far the largest assistance from the United States inside Syria is for the humanitarian effort. Of the $1 billion that we've made available so far, and I say so far because I'm sure the number will go up, over half of that is for the humanitarian crisis inside Syria. The challenge has been, as I said a minute ago, because of the fighting, it's access. We provide humanitarian assistance to areas controlled by the regime, and we could provide humanitarian assistance to areas controlled by we call them the liberated areas, by the opposition. They're equally difficult to get to certain communities. The community in the center of Homs is one example. And the NGOs that we fund, I call them heroes because, well, they are. The work that they do in a city that's under siege to treat those that need urgent medical care is inspiring. You look at me, I've been doing this a very long time. I've seen a lot of reactions to a lot of crises, and this one inspires me. What these medical NGOs will do to set up a secret clinic in the basement of a building that's probably looks destroyed from the street to deliver urgent medical care to, say, a wounded rebel or a teenager that was caught in the wrong place at the wrong time when a shell landed nearby, to put that kid back together again, to stabilize him or her enough that then they could be moved to a better facility, perhaps across the border. Medical is getting a lot of our attention, and the numbers aren't big. I can tell you that we've done more than 80,000 surgeries. That's a lot of surgeries, but it's not a very big number. But each one of those surgeries requires secrecy, requires mobility, because these clinics have to move around all the time because the regime finds out where they are. The regime has targeted and killed over 120 medical professionals. We have to be very careful, but we're very active in this space, and that's why I call those particular NGOs that work in health heroes. Another big area we're working on in the humanitarian space is food. We think, estimates that there's between 6 and 7 million Syrians. This is out of a population of 22 million. So a third of the population is in need of some kind of help. We know we're not doing enough. We wish we could do more. We wish access were better. But with World Food Program, with the United Nations, we are getting food to, by our estimates, about 2 million people, so about a third of those in need. Is that enough? No, but it is a large number, and we continue to look for ways to do even more. The U.S. government itself, working with its own NGOs, is providing food to 200,000 people a day in Aleppo, in one city. We were particularly active there during the winter, getting flour and fuel to bakeries. I'm sure we'll have to do that again in the coming winter. The other big part of our assistance inside Syria, I mentioned these local councils that are popping up all over the place. And this is a good thing. This is communities trying to govern an area that had been under the control of the regime and is no longer. But how do they deliver essential services? How do you reopen schools? How do you get the hospital open again? How do you turn the water on again if a bomb destroyed a pipe? So the communities are electing councils, and we're going in and training them in what we call Governance 101. You know, how do you make a budget? How do you put personnel practices in place? How do you appeal to donors for funding? We're also providing, so we're doing a lot of training, and along with that training comes a lot of small equipment, office equipment, radios, laptops, but not the kind that you would buy in the store. This is radios and laptops and equipment that is secure in the sense that you can communicate with others without risk that the regime is overhearing what you're talking about. We're also providing big equipment. We're trying to get cities ambulances, fire trucks, garbage trucks, big generators to be able to turn the power back on in a high school or a hospital, big water containers, particularly for schools. We're beginning to get equipment like this inside as well. It's not exactly humanitarian, it's helping a city get back on its feet after it's been liberated. I'd say those are the main areas where we're working inside Syria.
How about support for the rebel groups?
You mean the fighters? I try to coordinate for the United States the non-lethal assistance to the opposition, and that does include to the Supreme Military Committee of the Free Syrian Army. We have provided, with a lot of help from our Department of Defense, over 300,000 meals, the same meals that our soldiers eat on the battlefield. We've provided over 300,000 meals to the Free Syrian Army. We've also provided several tons of medical supplies and equipment. And as we speak, we are buying millions of dollars worth of trucks, radio equipment, and more medical equipment in the countries surrounding Syria to improve their logistical capacity inside. So we're helping them as well.
For lethal aid?
I'm sorry?
How about lethal aid?
I don't work on the lethal aid. What is in the news, which is a lot, is what I know about the lethal assistance that's being provided. I can tell you that when we discuss with the commanders of the Free Syrian Army what logistics they need, they may be thinking about some of the not just moving personnel, but moving other things as well. I don't ask those questions. I just ask them what their logistics needs are.
Can you talk a little bit about, the amount of aid? So, I talked to UNICEF a few days ago, and they said basically, there's this huge funding gap between what's actually being provided and what's needed. Is the U.S. doing enough?
The U.S. is doing more than anyone else to support the UN's efforts. The United Nations is working principally in parts of the country that are still controlled by the regime. By the terms of the UN Charter, that's what they're required to do. NGOs, that is not the UN agencies, but international NGOs are providing the humanitarian assistance to the liberated parts of the country. So this is a complicated one for us in the humanitarian area because we're working with UN actors and the International Red Cross in the regime-controlled parts of the country, and that's not a bad thing. There's people there that truly need help. But we're also working with NGOs because they're the only actors that are working in the liberated areas. So we have to support both, and we have to find a balance between how much for the liberated parts of the country, how much for the non-liberated, for the regime-controlled parts of the country. And it's a debate that goes on in Washington every time the president announces more humanitarian aid. But no country gives more to the UN effort than the United States. But I go back to what I said before. The needs are far greater than any country is providing right now. I wish we could all do more, but the single greatest factor limiting what we're giving is access. It's really not funding. It's the ability to get in and deliver the aid.
Does U.S. aid go to areas that are controlled by Al-Qaeda groups like Al-Nusra or Jabhat al-Nusra or ISIS?
The NGOs that we fund do, absolutely. Yeah. And we have a policy when we're delivering humanitarian assistance. We may not tell the community that we're delivering the aid to that this food, this medicine, these blankets are from the United States, but we will tell the people in charge, even if there are enemies. Because we have found over the years that it's better not to surprise people later. If a community, if the people in charge of a community, even our enemies, know where the assistance is coming from, either they will allow us to deliver the assistance and help us if we have problems, or they won't. And so our policy is to let them know. So yes, we are working in some communities where certain of these groups are present. Part of our strategy for providing the big equipment that I talked about, the ambulances, the fire trucks, the garbage trucks, to other areas is to counter the assistance that some of these extremist groups are offering to those communities as well.